Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I love what you do as a coach and this opportunity for people to learn from people that have really been through some stuff and have come out on the other side, regardless of their degree of success or where they are in their life. And I would encourage anyone who is in that spot to take a deep breath, understand that they will come out the other side,
Yeah.
and just continuously keep going. Talk to people, meet people, take a step back. Like you said, understand what the problem is, and then once you have clearly defined it, get into solutioning mode. Because once you get there, possibilities are endless.
Welcome to Defy Limits, the podcast by Elena Levinson. Today, we're sitting down with another extraordinary guest. Every episode, we dive into raw, unfiltered conversations with risk takers who broke the rules and pushed far beyond what they thought was possible.
So welcome everybody, and welcome to my guest today, Brett Butler. Brett is an experienced consultant, entrepreneur, and husband that has a passion for optimizing businesses, investments, and revolutionizing hiring. He currently advises Fortune 500 companies as part of the PwC Financial Wellness team, and his company HireSphere AI specializes in interviewing as a service to make hiring faster, smart, and ensure quality employee-employer fits. That's kind of a tongue twister. So anyway, welcome, Brett.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be able to discuss with you.
Something that you had said to me when we talked earlier is that you always see the best in people. And with that comes trust, right? And I know trust is a big topic in my world. In terms of coaching individuals and teams. But, in this realm of trust in your life as a whole, how do you decide who to trust?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, ironically, even through all that I've been through, I naturally am just a positive person. And so I open myself up, kind of defaulting to trust until, I get additional information. But for me, it's really all about being present in the conversation, whether it's something like this being virtual as well as being in person. And then also just kind of feeding off of my gut. So that could be as simple as going to someone's LinkedIn profile, being able to just do some quick searches now with social media and AI. So many people's lives are online. And so for me, that's probably one of the first steps. And then afterwards, just how do I feel in the conversation? Luckily for me, I have the pleasure of talking with so many people all over the world. And so you get exposed to a bunch of kind of the good, the bad, the ugly. And so I'd say for me, I default leaning to trust people, but I also go through a verification process, not just what my gut says, but
Yeah.
also what are they actually saying and can I be able to validate it? So there's a lot of people like yourself and Jeremy and people that are in my really core network that I will trust almost probably to a fault because I see like the lives that you guys live. And if something goes against that, it's kind of red flags come up about, okay, what are the intentions that this person has for saying this? Are they maliciously trying to lead me down a path, or is it, they're not intentionally trying to deceive me. It's just they're not aware of a situation. So I think it's very situational dependent, but just having lots of conversations and building up that gut verification process is kind of how I do things.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's sort of a little mix of using intuition as well as being your own PI, if you will,
Yeah, that's a great summary.
I've been through some experiences too. And it's interesting paying attention to facial expressions, body language that people choose to use, whether it's conscious or subconscious, which a lot of the time it's very subconscious. I'm almost to an extreme, very intentional about what I say and how I say it. And then I'll use my spidey sense, right? Like what is my spidey sense telling me about someone? And I'm not saying I'm 100% right all the time. I don't know how you could be, but yeah, I guess when we go through unfortunate learnings, we start to learn that aspect about our species, if you will, and asking questions using
Exactly.
curiosity. And I've also learned not to be afraid to ask questions. And when I coach people, my sense is that people are afraid to probe further or ask a question if their intuition is telling them something? Why not just ask it?
Yeah, and that's a really deep skill, asking strategic questions, being really intentional. And one of the things I struggled with early on was this notion that we all have different interpretations of language.
Yep.
And so what I mean by that is I could say a word and it means like an example that I always give is camping. To some people, camping is fantastic. It was the best thing that I ever had when I was younger. We backpacked in the mountains. For other people, it was a traumatic experience and they never want to be outside. Just one word. And so when you get into business and consulting, investments, finance, like it gets very nuanced. And so, like you said, being really intentional and coming to a consensus on what people mean by simple language, because you can avoid a lot of misinterpretations that way as well.
The big learning situation that you had experienced, when that whole thing came crashing down, you mentioned going through a whole gamut of emotions. I can only imagine. And then navigating through your identity of what does success mean for you, and then to go through that, and then navigating the emotional life as well as what does this even mean to me anymore?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting now when I talk to entrepreneurs, founders, or even people that have been successful in other kind of business ventures. They talk about kind of the big learning that you and I have had many conversations on, where I think you have to, as a person, just encounter those difficulties. So it allows you to be able to become the person you have to be to achieve the success that you want, whether that's, physical, mental, social, spiritual, financial, whatever it is to you. And that was kind of my night in the barrel type of thing, to where it allowed me to really evaluate myself, kind of detach myself from the situation, which up to that point I was really not good at doing, and understand that regardless of the situation that you're in, there's always going to be, opportunity. There's always going to be opportunities for growth and learning and positivity. But conversely, there's always an opportunity to fail. And it's kind of changing your mindset on looking at failures as a pathway to growth rather than, oh, I made a mistake, I failed, I'm not going to ask questions, I'm just going to, maybe nobody will notice. But everybody that I talk to that has achieved anything has failed massively along the way. The only difference is they just didn't quit. They take away the learnings rather than the guilt or the difficulty in the situation.
In listening to what you're saying and also what you're not saying, what I'm still getting from you is the amount of energy and exertion that people put towards avoiding failure and making mistakes, and how that actually in turn will defeat us and work against us. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest mistake at all, is trying to avoid making any mistakes. Because if you think about it, whether it's in school when we were younger, or in relationships, or in business, the only way that we can learn and grow is to make mistakes, to be able to push those boundaries. And it's the people that have achieved the greatest that failed the most along the way. They pushed the boundaries. They took what was completely impossible, whether for themselves or for a nation, and they made it possible. And if you're not willing to go through those trials and tribulations, oftentimes I find that you're never going to actually achieve what you wanted. And the other thing I'll add is that a lot of the initial goals that I set for myself and people that I've talked to were just a fraction of what they were actually capable of. And it was only through going through those mistakes to realize, wow, I thought that I wanted A, but I really want B and C. And I was shortchanging myself because I didn't know.
I've experienced that in my own life where I've undervalued myself. And I see that in the people that I coach too. And being that you help people in their careers, I can only imagine how that shows up for them too.
Absolutely. It is a very transformational event. I'm sure you experience it all the time, to where it's not even just for me, like people getting a job or getting a promotion. It's the mindset shift of realizing that I can really achieve anything. Like the only limits I can set are the ones I put on myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, Brett, I love that. So there's different types of stressors in life. And one that I think every single person on the planet goes through is financial stress. And you actually went from thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have $10 million in my bank account to actually only having 12 in that low point of rebuilding. So catch us up and share what you went through, which required you to then look at that in a whole different way.
Yeah, so it was right after I graduated from college. I truthfully at the time I really didn't know fully what I wanted to do. I thought, I was interested in law and business and a bunch of different things. And so I was always the guy that was trying things to figure out what I wanted to do. And lo and behold, I stumbled upon this thing called cryptocurrency. I got involved in it. I had no idea what I was doing. It was flat out right place, right time. And by sheer dumb luck, I turned some graduation money and about 100x'd it in a matter of months, and I was hooked. And so from that time, I was like, okay, let's take the business practices, let's consult for crypto startups, let's do anything I can. Like there was no job that I took that was too low because I just wanted to learn and I wanted to build a network. And one of the first major companies that I was able to not just invest in, but work for was a company called ICOT. And the concept was essentially taking tokenized investments. So if you think about a normal investment portfolio, like a mutual fund, you're investing in a bunch of different companies at the same time. And it was kind of early stage, and they were probably 20, 25 people that had invested and they were building up their community. But I was really drawn to what they were doing because my background was more in corporate finance. And I thought this could introduce a lot of people to cryptocurrency in a responsible manner. So I joined the team. I helped as part of business development. I helped build the community from 25 to 30 people when I joined to over 50,000. We took the token at the time from a penny to over $1. So on paper, it was worth over $100 million. And my contract was basically saying that once we hit various revenue and valuation benchmarks, I was due $10 million. And so I was ecstatic. I mean, I'm in my early 20s. I'm like, oh man, I've got it all figured out. I'm the man. And at the time I was flying high. And about 2 weeks before I was supposed to get that money, it basically, it vanished. The website went off. All the communication methods were gone. And the founder basically ran away with all the money. And because I had been such a public facing figure in that group, relatively speaking, everybody was kind of turning to me. And it was probably the most difficult time I had in my life because at the time, I mean, I'm in my early 20s.
Yeah.
I really didn't have a lot of true business experience at that level. And you have people at the time that had put in tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars into this project. And basically, I'm public enemy number one. And so going through that coupled with kind of my identity, because at the time I was like, hey, if you're not a millionaire by 30, you're failing type of thing. I was in that mindset. And then it got built up even more where I'm not just going to be a millionaire. I'm going to have 10 million. And after taxes and stuff like that, I've always been someone who is strategically planning. So I'm like, okay, once that clears, I'm going to pay off this. I'm going to buy my parents a house. I'm going to diversify. I'm set. But I had no control over the situation. And so at the time, it was soul crushing. I mean, I thought, my life's over. I have no reputation. I have no money. I've been in business. I failed as part of the business and my life's over at 24, 25. Lo and behold, those relationships actually led to opportunities consulting with other businesses. I actually, when I submitted to get my MBA, it was kind of an entrepreneurship program to where you would pitch to investors. I actually pitched a revised version of the project. I didn't win, but I scored very well. And that led me to kind of where I am today, understanding that it's all about the people within an organization, whether it's a startup, whether it's Fortune 500 company, and the underlying technology behind it, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and AI, we see all over the place now. And so I had to kind of reflect and say the situation was terrible, but what did I learn? And yet I have not made the $10 million back, far from it, but the relationships that I've gathered and the lessons that I got, I learned more in probably that 6-month period than I did all of undergrad, all of high school, all of my MBA combined, because I learned about myself, I learned about life, I learned about relationships, and I learned what not to do. So I didn't make that mistake anymore, which was kind of like what we started, which was trusting without the verification piece. Because at that point in my life, I was all about, I'm a good person. Everybody's a good person. What they say is what you get. And I learned very quickly that you have to be able to verify. You can't just blindly trust, because that's when you get into trouble. And so now, whether it's in business, relationships, life, I'm still happy-go-lucky, very friendly and warm and outgoing, but there's a professional side of it to where I's dotted, T's crossed, especially when money changes hands, that I have non-negotiables that it doesn't matter who it is, this is how I do business. And that, when I'm talking with new clients, has been completely transformational, because most of the people at the time in that space weren't doing that. And one of the really refreshing things now is that a lot of the companies that are out there that are in crypto and Web3 are operating with responsible business practices.
It's interesting. Well, first, I'm so glad that you didn't lose that part of who you are, because an experience like that could easily cause someone to just shut down and not trust anybody ever again, or want to engage in similar work ever again, or be inspired to do something new. And what's interesting is that you now engage in a more formalized vetting process to create that trust, to make sure that you're looking into someone's background and the validity of what they say in alignment with the true facts about their background. That you also have deepened your ability to have relationships and a deeper connection with people. Am I hearing that right?
I definitely think so. I think when I reflect on the experience, I think that was really the genesis of me starting to get into more of the people science and company science and blending the two.
Yeah.
It's definitely grown leaps and bounds since building deeper relationships after that. But I had to reflect on, okay, how did I get in this situation? And what red flags did I ignore just because I was being the positive person? But that also allowed me to realize that several calls where I get on initially when it's a kickoff call with a client, I'll just go through even before they pay and say, look, what are your non-negotiables? How do you do business? Who do I need to communicate with? And here's mine, because I need to make sure that there's alignment. And then afterwards, we can be best friends. I will run through a brick wall for you. But if we're not a good fit, all we're doing is wasting each other's time. And I don't want to do that. And I know they don't either. And so that the spaces that I run in now has gained a lot of respect, because in 5-10 minutes, we've covered kind of the surface level, but we've gotten to, okay, I understand the core values of that person, and there's alignment and there's mutual respect there, which then allows us to do tremendous things.
And talk about it just feel it's cleaner, it's more clear, and talk about a more direct upfront way of setting a very powerful foundation of trust to then just continue to build upon.
Yeah, I think the phrase that I keep coming back to is, you can't trust another person until you understand them. And you can't understand them until you understand yourself. And so what I try and do is understand whether it's a relationship, with my wife and I, before we got married, ironically, on our first date, we actually talked about all of the major core values and issues. I mean, we talked about retirement, kids, finances, religion, everything, which, looking back on it, was probably the best thing possible, because we both knew, okay, we agree on the big rocks. Now let's get into and build that relationship with the solid foundation. It is the same thing for business. If I'm talking with investors, I don't just want to know, okay, what's your ticket size? What do you invest in? Because I've done that research, but I want to understand, who else is involved in the investment decision? How often do you want me to follow up with you? Because I'm thinking from their perspective, they don't want to hear from me every week, but they also don't want to hear from me every 6 months, because I'll basically fall into the radar.
Yeah.
And so by setting those expectations from the beginning around, how we communicate, what the capital is going to be used for, how do they invest, and what do they look for? It directly applies to a job. Like we coach people to be able to ask very specific strategic questions because a lot of people may be afraid that, oh, I'm going to lose a job if I say that, this is a non-negotiable for me. A big thing is, hey, I want to be able to work remote for some people. But by providing context and having it from that first meeting that given my situation right now, I have to be able to work remote. Is that a non-negotiable for you? If it is, I totally understand, but we can end it now and we don't have to go through a process with you because I know regardless, I can't accept it. And so getting really clear on understanding yourself so you can understand them and you can go in having a much deeper relationship. And I find that by doing that, not only does it build a relationship, but it creates a environment to where both parties are willing to ask those more difficult questions that they wouldn't otherwise.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So many thoughts about all that. Were you and your wife together when you experienced this whole thing?
I was, yes. So it was, God, that was crazy because she knew me in college. I was the guy, I was doing everything. The guy had my hands in business and blah. I was going to do this. And she was like, okay, wow. I'm basically dating a guy who's going to be worth $10 million. This is incredible. And what was interesting is in the aftermath of that, I learned a lot about our relationship because a lot of times people are with each other for money or for
Right.
anything else. And when I had that conversation with her, it was probably harder than with those investors because I didn't know if, okay, she's going to leave me type of
Yeah.
thing and find someone else, but she didn't. And so now, as I continue building myself and my business and my career, there's absolute trust on both sides type of thing. So as bad as it was, because I'm sure many of your listeners are going to go through this as well to varying degrees, know that the storm will pass, the sun will rise tomorrow, and you'll come out on the other side. If you use it productively, it'll pay itself tenfold.
Oh, Brett, I so appreciate your attitude about this. So on that note, the many lessons, right? So one, being able to pivot from, so you were telling me before also that for a couple of months or for a while, you were chasing to try to find who you could figure out who did this, and then
Mhm.
like to be able to get people's money back or your own money back. And then at some point there was that point of no return when you just accepted the loss. So what's the advice that you have for the audience in case they're going through something where that point will benefit them?
Yeah, I'd say that regardless of whether times are going good or going bad, one of the things that always helped me was setting deadlines. So I basically, because I was chasing every possible lead for months and getting nowhere. And so I had a come to Jesus moment with myself around, okay, you've got 30 more days to put your best effort to be able to find this, but you're wasting so much energy trying to chase this guy that you may never find and the money that is probably already spent. If I dedicated that energy to instead, okay, creating something that could be able to pay people back tenfold, that I could be proud of, that I could apply what I learned. Where do you want to spend your focus and your energy? And so for me, that was really healing. I know that's tough advice in the moment to take because I've been
Yeah.
there, but
Yeah.
I can tell you on the other side, it's really comforting because you know that, okay, there's a deadline and it forces you to be able to be more effective, be more creative, and to be able to tell people straight up, like I'm doing everything in my power, but after this time, I'm focusing on something else. And ironically, a couple of people that were actually a part of that project, we actually did business together several times where they either invested in me or we invested together. And it was
Yeah.
because of that pivot. Had that not happened, you know, we never would be here talking today more than likely because I would still be trying to chase down all these people that did things and spinning my wheels and hey, I'm going to get there eventually. I'm going to get that money back. And yes, it's no doubt I would love to have it, but I'm much more happier now and at a much better place than I was back then.
No, beautiful. I love it. Well, that brings me to where I want to go next in terms of, like you said, something about going from pain to purpose, right? And the importance of contracts and vetting and being able to have tough conversations up front, like we were talking about earlier. And you said this saying, it's like slow to smooth, smooth to fast, which directly relates to what you're doing now with Higher Spirit. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I had this idea, along with several others. While I'm doing business, I'm going to go to law school, that I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, because I was always fascinated with, human performance and being in that culture of high performers. And that was one of their sayings that they had: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Because a lot of times in life, we're running around with a chicken, like a chicken with our head cut off type of thing. And when you really focus in the moment and you try and be able to slow down, it allows you to process things quicker, make quicker decisions. And so if you compare the two, someone that is moving with purpose but very deliberately will actually finish faster than the person that's running around and they're discombobulated. And so for me, that's really important in business and what we do with Higher Sphere, because it's about being slow in certain areas because it allows you to be fast in others. And what I mean by that is slow to hire, quick to fire, fastest to promote. That's kind of the mentality that I use, where if an individual or a business understands themselves and they understand the values of their organization and what they're looking for, they can be really deliberate when they're evaluating candidates because they know what they're looking for. When they make a decision and they get someone in their organization, they realize they've made a mistake, kind of like what we talked about earlier. People are often afraid to ask questions. They're also often afraid to be able to admit that they made a mistake. And oftentimes a hiring decision is that. But when you see someone in an organization, whether they're the C-suite level or all the way at the bottom, you're doing yourself and that person a disservice if you know they're in a position to where it's just not a good fit. And so I'd rather have a conversation with them and ideally move them to another role within the organization. But if I can't, connect them to a better place where it's mutually beneficial, even if it's another organization. And then finally, promote fastest, to me, is all about validating that if I made a good decision and this is a top performer and I want them to be a part of the organization, saying, okay, how can we be able to give more opportunity to this person, further align the goals of the business with the goals of that individual, and reward them and set that precedent that we're going to hire within, we're going to promote within as long as we can. So that way you have a good culture within the organization that essentially builds itself once you have that foundation set.
The last thing, during this whole journey, I'm sure there were what I would call enduring insights, like overcoming challenges and seeing opportunities after setbacks. So how might being able to do that effectively in a person's life as a whole be really valuable or beneficial for someone?
So part of a startup that failed miserably would be a poster child of a failed business of what you shouldn't do.
Right.
And at the time, I had very little experience following that. I had little money. I had little credibility. But on the other hand, in that circumstance, I understood what it took to have true entrepreneurial character. I understood what I was looking for in a partner. And I understood what I didn't need to do to be able to build something that was sustainable. Same exact situation. What are you focusing on? So for anybody that is in that moment right now, whatever that is, try and focus on the positive. Try and look at the learnings that you had, because they will have a cascading effect. I mean, the example of, hey, if you get 1% better each year, you're like 500 times better at the end of the year. And so just focus on that.
In any given moment where we have a choice, right? We have the ability to exercise our power choice in literally every single moment. And I think people forget that. A long time ago, I learned that our brain, I'm a geek about brain science and heart science, the more you look into my stuff, but I once learned a long time ago that our brain can't be focused on the problem and the solution at the same time. So I'm not saying don't don't look at the problem. It's important to look at the problem so that you know which direction to go in. But when you see the problem, be clear about what the problem actually is, because sometimes people try to fix the wrong one. And then before they know it, they're like, how come this isn't resolved yet? So figure out what the real problem is and then get curious and then shift to solutioning or solutionizing, as I call it. Yeah, it's just, there's so much. And I so appreciate your attitude about what you've gone through and what you've done with it, what you've created, how you're helping people. And yeah, I mean, you have such a life ahead of you and so much opportunity. So I wish you and HireSphere all the best. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I love what you do as a coach.
Well, Brett, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate your contribution to the show, and hopefully some people got some nuggets out of our conversation today. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because big breakthroughs start with bold conversations. And if you're done playing it safe, tired of waiting, or trying to figure it all out alone, let's talk. Elena Levinson works with leaders and entrepreneurs who are ready to break through and go all in. You can connect with Elena on her YouTube channel or find her on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you got value from this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and drop a comment. We'd love to hear what resonated with you. Until next time, keep pushing, keep trusting yourself, and keep defying limits. See you soon.